Affirmative action is the policy of favoring members of a disadvantaged group who currently suffer or historically have suffered from discrimination within a culture. Often, these people are disadvantaged for historical reasons, such as oppression or slavery. Historically and internationally, support for affirmative action has sought to achieve goals such as bridging inequalities in employment and pay, increasing access to education, promoting diversity, and redressing apparent past wrongs, harms, or hindrances. The nature of affirmative action policies varies from region to region. Some countries, such as India, use a quota system, whereby a certain percentage of government jobs, political positions, and school vacancies must be reserved for members of a certain group. In some other regions where quotas are not used, minority group members are given preference or special consideration in selection processes. In 1989, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination stipulated that affirmative action programs may be required of countries that ratified the convention in order to rectify systematic discrimination. It also states that such programs shall in no case entail as a consequence the maintenance of unequal or separate rights for different racial groups after the objectives for which they were taken have been achieved. Several countries, such as India, reserve political positions for members of disadvantaged groups. In the United States, affirmative action in employment and education has been the subject of legal and political controversy, and in 2003, a pair of U.S. Supreme Court decisions permitted educational institutions to consider race as a factor when admitting students while prohibiting the use of quotas. In other countries, such as the UK, affirmative action is rendered illegal because it does not treat all races equally. This approach to equal treatment is described as being colorblind. Quote, in such countries the focus tends to be on ensuring equal opportunity and, for example, targeted advertising campaigns to encourage ethnic minority candidates to join the police force. This is sometimes described as positive action. Opponents of affirmative action such as George Shah believe that affirmative action devalues the accomplishments of people who are chosen based on the social group to which they belong rather than their qualifications, thus rendering affirmative action counterproductive. Opponents, who sometimes say that affirmative action is reverse discrimination, further claim that affirmative action has undesirable side effects in addition to failing to achieve its goals. For example, the idea of mismatching suggests that affirmative action might place students into colleges that are too difficult for them, increasing the chances of dropping out. Origins. The term affirmative action was first used in the United States in Executive Order No. 10925, signed by President John F. Kennedy on 6 March 1961, which included a provision that government contractors take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed, and employees are treated during employment without regard to the race, creed, color, or national origin. Quote, it was used to promote actions that achieve non-discrimination. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson issued Executive Order 11246, which required government employers to take affirmative action to hire without regard to race, religion, and national origin. This prevented employers from discriminating against members of disadvantaged groups. In 1967, gender was added to the anti-discrimination list. Affirmative action is intended to promote the opportunities of defined minority groups within a society to give them equal access to that of the majority population. It is often instituted for government and educational settings to ensure that certain designated minority groups within a society are able to participate in all provided opportunities including promotional, educational, and training opportunities. The stated justification for affirmative action by its proponents is that it helps to compensate for past discrimination, persecution or exploitation by the ruling class of a culture, and to address existing discrimination. Women. Several different studies investigated the effect of affirmative action on women. Curtius, in her review of affirmative action and the occupational advancement of minorities and women during 1973 to 2003, showed that the effect of affirmative action on advancing Black, Hispanic, and white women into management, professional, and technical occupations occurred primarily during the 1970s and early 1980s. During this period, contractors grew the shares of these groups more rapidly than non-contractors because of the implementation of affirmative action. But the positive effect of affirmative action vanished entirely in the late 1980s, which Curtius says may be due to the slowdown into advanced occupation for women and minorities because of the political shift of affirmative action that started by President Reagan. Becoming a federal contractor increased white women's share of professional occupations by 0.183 percentage points, or 7.3%, on average during these 3 decades, and increased black women's share by 0.052 percentage points. Becoming a federal contractor also increased Hispanic women's and black men's share of technical occupations on average by 0.058% and 0.109 percentage points respectively. These represent a substantial contribution of affirmative action to overall trends in the occupational advancement of women and minorities over the 3 decades under the study. A further study by Kim and Kim considered the impact of 4 primary factors on support for affirmative action programs for women: gender, political factors, psychological factors, and social structure. They found that affirmative action both corrects existing unfair treatment and gives women equal opportunity in the future. Quotas. Law regarding quotas and affirmative action varies widely from nation to nation. Caste-based quotas are used in reservation in India. However, they are illegal in the United States, where no employer, university, or other entity may create a set number required for each race. In 2012, the European Union Commission approved a plan for women to constitute 40% of non-executive board directorships in large listed companies in Europe by 2020. In Sweden, the Supreme Court has ruled that affirmative action ethnic quotas in universities are discrimination and hence unlawful. It said that the requirements for the intake should be the same for all. The Justice Chancellor said that the decision left no room for uncertainty.